Ladies and gentlemen, start your engine.
Hi, I'm Larry Black, and I'm going to show you how to get behind the wheel of one of these stock cars.
Stock car racing is more than driving in a circle. Top drivers and crew chiefs will tell you that the race always starts before you get in the car.
Equipment and your team is the key to everything, I think, and I'm very fortunate this year to be with Hendrick Motorsports. We've got a great Winston Cup team.
Hi, I'm Larry McReynolds, crew chief for the Texaco Havoline Ford Thunderbird, driven by Ernie Irvin on the NASCAR Winston Cup Series. What I'd like to do is just explain a few basic things that I do when I set our race car up for a race. Also, what it might let you do is learn about some of the terms that you hear on the telecast of some of the races that you watch or listen to on the radio. One of the most important things that we really pay close attention to in our race car is the tire itself. Some races we'll go through as many as 12 sets of tire during a 500-mile race. Goodyear has introduced the radial tire. We no longer can adjust the stagger, which is the difference in the size from the left to the right side tire. The radial tire is locked into one size. But what we really can do is change the handling characteristics of the car by simply adjusting the air pressure just a small amount. It tracks 1 mile and bigger on the Winston Cup circuit, where speeds sometimes reach close to 200 miles an hour. We run a tire within a tire. Goodyear calls it an interliner. It normally has a pressure about 20 pounds more than the outer tire, and what this will do if we develop a flat or cut one of the outer tires down, we have this safety shield or this interliner to at least let you get back around to the pits to change that tire. There's a lot of different things about a race car that relates to your passenger car, but one term that's used a lot in racing that we have to work with, and it also relates when you carry your car down to the front end alignment shop, is the actual camber of the tire. What camber is how the tire is tipped. If the tire is tipped inward or to the inside of the race car, that's called negative camber. If it's tipped out, that's called positive camber. With a car going around a left-hand corner, we always want positive camber in the left wheels and negative camber in the right wheels. The way we adjust camber is with shims. It's called front-end shims. We simply put them behind the upper A-frame, and that adjusts the camber. Camber is measured in degrees, and the way we check that is simply with a camber gauge. Normally we'll run somewhere around 4 degrees negative in the right front and around 3 degrees positive in the left front. One of the most important elements about being successful in round track racing is how you get through the corner. And that's the reason that we want camber. Getting through the corner the fastest normally means having the most of this tire on the ground. So what that'll mean is, as you're going down the straightaway, the tire maybe won't be completely on the ground because of camber. But when you load the car in the corner with the right amount of camber, you'll get this whole tread patch on the corner, and when you can do that, that means you'll go around the corner faster. We build our cars just as light as we can. Then what we do to get the cars up to the minimum weight requirement is we use lead, normally in the size of this form right here. And we try to put this lead just as low as we can, and what it'll normally do is slide in the frame rails of each side of the car. Once we get enough of this lead in our car to make sure that the total's right and that it weighs the right amount on the right side, then one thing that we want to do is we want to get the right amount proportion between front and rear. We can change the handling characteristics of the car quite dramatically by simply sliding weight back in the frame rail or sliding weight forward. Normally we will run our cars with about 51 to 51.5% of the total weight on the two front axles. The way that we figure this, rather than do it with pen and paper or with a calculator, is with a set of scales like this right here. This will pop up the wheel weights of each of the four wheels. It'll tell us what the total is, what the right side is, and what the front and rear percentage is. There's two things that you just can't sacrifice. That's one, make the car so light that it starts moving around late in a race when things start to get hot and move around. But most importantly, the one thing that you can't sacrifice is the safety of your driver. Never ever do anything that's going to hurt his safety just to make your race car a better race car. Speed is not everything. Hopefully this will help you, and I will give you the rest of the story later.
As Larry just said, nothing is more important than the safety of the driver, and that begins with a visit to the Simpson Race Product Shop. There you can get the mandatory 5-point safety harness, a helmet like the popular Simpson Sidewinder model, double and triple layered Nomex fire retardant driving suits and Nomex underwear, specially designed lightweight high-top driving shoes, and double-layered Talon grip driving gloves. All of this works together to give the driver a comfortable and safe layer of protection. Now that you have the right gear, it's time to go to the track. Since a race car body is built around a solid cage of steel tubing, there is no door to open. The only way to get in is through the window. Feet first is the easiest way. Slide into the seat, which is custom made for the driver's body. Once you're in the car, the next step is to fasten the 5-point safety harness, which consists of 2 shoulder belts, 2 lap belts, and an anti-submarine belt which comes up through the bottom of the seat. This belt will help you keep from sliding under the lap belts. These straps come together at the waist to hold the driver firmly in the seat. Once you hook the belts together, make sure you hear the click that tells you everything is locked into place. Pull each strap until the harness is tight against the body. It's the vibration and movement that will tire you out over the course of a long race, so the tighter the fit, the more energy you will save. The tremendous forces that a driver goes through at high speeds will tend to loosen the harness. Now it's time to attach the steering wheel, which in a race car comes off to help you in getting in and out of the car. Since there's no horn or cruise control, the only thing you have to remember is to secure the wheel with a long pin which is attached to the wheel. Forget the pin and the steering wheel will come off. Veteran drivers have destroyed race cars because the pin was not in the wheel, so it's good to always double check to see if the pin is in. Take the same precaution in putting on your helmet, making sure that it fits comfortably and is securely fastened. Your race crew is there to help you and make sure that you are ready to take to the track. Now it's time to fire the car up. Make sure that all the gauges are easily in sight and readable. More than miles per hour and RPMs, they will tell you how your machine is running. Start your engine by flipping the ignition switch and then the starter switch. Check the gauges again. Oil pressure should be about 60 to 80 pounds, anything below 30 and shut the motor off. Oil and water temperature should be around 200 degrees but below 230. The last thing we'll do is put the window net up, another safety precaution before heading out onto the racetrack.
Well, you just learn so much as you keep going. You know, you learn the basics of, like when I first came down here, I'd run a lot of races, but didn't have the opportunity to go to a school like Fast Track or something where you got to run a heavy car and a big track then. So it's a lot different. Now I think it's a little easier to get some experience, like something like that than the Sportsman Series and that, but you just learn so much every time you go out.
2 words to remember in racing are concentration and respect. Concentration on what you're doing, as well as what's going on around you, and respect for your car, the track, and your competition. When shifting, let the clutch out slowly. Be very smooth and very easy with your equipment. Transmissions and clutches can really take a beating on pit road, and remember, to win a race you have to be around at the end of it. That's why it's a priority to respect your car during a race. Remember, slow and smooth shifts. When coming out of the pits, stay all the way down on the apron, below the white blend line. Once we're up to speed, we'll be up next to the wall on the backstretch. Now it's time to find our line on the racetrack. This is something you'll hear about on every race broadcast. Sometimes they'll call it finding the groove. What it means is finding the fastest and easiest way around the track. Even though it would be shorter to drive a tight inner lane, the simple fact is that you can go faster straight than you can while turning. The best way to maintain speed is to try and straighten out the corners by using all the racetrack to your advantage. By taking a wider position, sometimes all the way to the wall, you can hold your speed by cutting the corners. The point on a corner where you want to aim for is called the apex, and finding it is one of the secrets to driving fast. Now let's take a practice lap on this superspeedway. We will take a tight line into turn 3. You would try to hold the car close to the white line until the center of the corner. Then we'll let the car ease back up the racetrack and all the way out next to the wall off of turn 4. Right back to lane 1 at the first dog leg. Lane 3 at the flag stand. Lane 1 at the second dog leg, and back out next to the wall going into turn 1. Then we'll drive the car back down to the white line in turn 1 and hold the car on the bottom of the track until you come off of turn 2. Again, use up all the racetrack and get right out next to the wall. Now let's take a look from another angle. Take it easy and get to know the car and the track so you can use every bit of both. Don't be afraid to run close to the wall or to hold a tight line in the corner. A key to successful racing is to know your limits and that of your car and to drive as close to those limits as you possibly can. After we've taken a few practice laps and we're ready to come back into the pits, we'll begin by making a hand signal. The only way you can communicate with other drivers is through hand signals. To let others know that you'll be coming into the pits, be sure to signal early by waving your right hand back and forth. Get down below the white line until you get to the entrance to pit road. Once you're on the apron, check your brakes and start getting down to your pit road speed limit. In competition, this speed is strictly enforced for safety reasons. At this track, the limit is 65 miles per hour. Stay to the right until you get close to your pit stall, so not to interfere with other teams or drivers. Now that we've taken the car out for a run, let's go back to Larry McReynolds to learn how top crews fine-tune a race car.
I'm sure during many broadcasts of races that you've watched, you've heard of teams putting bite in or wedge in or taking wedge in or bite out of a race car during the race. We can change the handling characteristics of the car quite dramatically on pit stops by adjusting the bite. What the wedge of a race car is a percentage total of the right front and left rear wheel weights of the race car. If we want to put wedge in or bite in, what we simply do is screw down on this jack bolt on top of the spring. We can do it by screwing down on the right front or the left rear. That will put more weight on this wheel and on that left rear, and it'll actually take weight off of the left front and off of the right rear. We can do this by adjusting these jack bolts without ever moving any of the lead. If you're ever around the Winston Cup garage area during practice and before an event, Something you'll see teams changing quite frequently is the coil springs. We can change these either in the rear or the front and completely change the handling characteristics of the car. A rear spring is kind of tall and skinny like this one right here. At a place like Martinsville where the turns are slow and the corners are flat, we'll run as soft as a 200-pound spring in the rear. A place like Daytona or Talladega where the speeds are high, the loads are great, and the bank is steepened, we'll run as much as 500 or 600-pound springs in the rear. A front spring is kind of short like this one right here. Again, at Martinsville, at a place where the corners are flat, we'll run springs as soft as 800 pounds. At a place like Talladega where the car gets the greatest load on the right front spring may rate as much as around 3,500 pounds. Once the race starts, we really can't change these coil springs, but an adjustment that we do have is a little piece of spring rubber like this. We can insert this into the springs and increase the rate of this spring by as much as 50 pounds. Or if when the race starts we have one of these in there, we can yank it out on a pit stop and reduce the rate of that spring by 25 to 50 pounds. Another very important part of the race car, especially at tracks where the corners are real bumpy, is the shock absorber itself. This has to kind of work hand in hand with the spring. Unlike many years ago when the companies would only make shocks with oil in them, now they've come out with a shock that's gas pressurized. We only have to run one per wheel now. Some teams will have as many as 70, 80 of these shocks on their truck where they can adjust the bump, which is the pushing in of the shock, or the rebound, which is the shock coming out. Besides all of the things about the chassis that we constantly are having to adjust on, we also have all of the aerodynamics of a race car to work with. One important aerodynamic tuning tool at the racetrack that we have is the front end openings. This is which air passes to cool the water in the radiator or the oil in the oil cooler. Now you might see teams when it comes time to qualify, when you're only going to run 1 or 2 laps, we'll tape these up just as much as we can because we're only going to run a couple of laps. When you tape the opening of these front end up, what that will do, that will reduce the drag of this race car. It'll make it go through the air faster. But when it comes time to race, to run 200 or 300 mile races, we have to open up enough of this to cool the water and to cool the oil. That will hurt the drag of the car, and it will also take downforce away from the car, which means that the down pressure on the front end is not going to be as great when it's taped up. We've talked about a lot of different things about the chassis. We've talked about the tires, we've talked about the springs and shocks, the camber. But once you get all of these things right, there's still another important thing that you've got to put a lot of effort into to get right. It's the aerodynamics of these race cars. This sheet metal is not just put on here to have a pretty paint job and to put decals on. The performance of the race car depends a lot on how well the aerodynamics are. We spend a lot of time and a lot of money in wind tunnels trying to get the most efficient body that we can on these cars. We try to get the drag just as low as possible, which is the resistance that the car has going through the air. We also try to get as much downforce as we can on both ends. That's the pressure on the front of the car and the rear of this car. We try to do that without hurting the drag just as little as possible. Once you get all these things working right on your chassis, get your aerodynamics working with it, this should make your driver comfortable to go around the corner just as fast as possible.
Concentration is the main thing. You cannot let yourself be thinking of other things while you're out there. You've got to concentrate of where you are on the racetrack, the line that you're running, keeping your hands smooth and steady on the steering wheel, and of course watching the traffic out in front of you. Don't drive off the nose of your car. Make sure that your depth perception is coming into play. So those are the types of things anyone new coming along and trying to get into the sport would have to really learn.
As Sherry Minner was saying, it's important not to drive off the nose of your car. Whether on a practice run by yourself, or in particular with other cars on the track, this simply means to look ahead and be aware of what's going on around you so that you can plan and react accordingly. In a drafting situation, it's real easy to focus only on the car in front of you. However, you want to run your own line, not the line of your competitor. If that driver goes off in turn 1 and hits the wall, you don't want to follow blindly. What you do want is to be aware of what that other car is doing, but without getting tunnel vision on that back bumper. Look through that race car and on down the track. You also have to pay attention to what's going on beside and behind you. This is especially important when you're racing bumper to bumper and door to door in a pack. Learning how to use your mirrors quickly and peripheral vision are important racing skills. This is also a time when having trust in the drivers you're racing with is critical. There's no room for error when you're running inches apart at speeds up to 200 miles an hour. That's why NASCAR and other racing organizations require strict testing and licensing of their drivers. Even in the heat of competition, there are basic rules and principles which are based on the safety of everyone involved. Trust and confidence are of the utmost importance.
I think you learn something every race you run, and it might be something you learn about one of your competitors or something else, but I think there's really no substitute for experience.
Really, you basically just have to stay focused through the whole race. I mean, there's nothing, you really think about each lap. You race each lap of the track, and you also have to, take each battle. I mean, it's like a big war, but you got to win every battle. So each car you come up on or whatever you're doing, you try to win that battle to try to win the war toward the end of the race.
Well, it's just like in anything. When I got in the car, I'd never been in a stock car, so I treated it like it was something new to me. I started off real easy, just worked my way up, and you're better off in the long run if you just get in and respect what you're driving.
Love of it as a kid, I guess. Just always liked cars, and a little dirt track in our hometown, and I knew I wanted to be involved in it, didn't know to what degree, and at the age of 20, I decided I wanted to drive, and that's what I've pursued ever since.
Well, yeah, I started out on the short tracks around the southeast here, and until you're here, you don't know what it's like.
I don't know, I love the competition. I mean, more so than the thrill of going fast or something like that, but just knowing on some days that you're able to beat everybody else really makes it all worthwhile.
From bragging rights on country roads to million-dollar paydays on super speedways, the excitement of racing has always remained the same.